I always had a desire to have children, and I would say there were some challenges that I came into the knowledge of with my first marriage, and unfortunately I found out through, an andrology report that I was technically diagnosed like as being borderline sterile. It took some of the hopes of potentially having kids, not necessarily off the table, but I knew it would come with so much challenges. Going into a relationship with my now wife is crazy because when I met her, probably like maybe a week into that relationship, one of the first things I told her was like, hey, before we even consider getting serious, like, I just want you to know that I can't have kids. I really believe what that report stated, and that came with its challenges. Noe still wanted to pursue the relationship. I think she was just sprung on the kid. But I'll say this, it came with its challenges. So we were actually maybe like 2-3 years into, our marriage. Marriage was beautiful. We traveled maybe about 5 different countries within a 3-year time span. And then we really started getting serious about having children around maybe our 3rd year of marriage. And the desire still was there for me. I was just hoping that it would happen naturally. Unfortunately, went back and went to get an analysis done, and the same report came back. We initially were going to go through an IVF process, but we heard from God that that wasn't the route that we would end up taking. So we committed to having the children naturally. The Lord challenged us with sharing my testimony, which was extremely a vulnerable moment. And we hopped on Facebook, did a live, and I just was sharing, hey, this is what we're challenged with. We would appreciate you all to agree with us in prayer, but we're believing that God's going to allow us to have these children naturally. It was really private information that I didn't really want to share, especially when you talk about men in particular, we're always supposed to be the alpha. And most times when you hear about infertility, it's oftentimes the woman, not the male. So for me to be tasked with sharing that I was experiencing infertility and that it was actually on my end, it was extremely challenging, to say the least. There were moments where I was vacillating in emotions like, God, why would you withhold this from me? But then there were also the moments where I heard directly from God, and he would assure me that this was going to happen. I would say that there were moments of despair, especially during Father's Day and Mother's Day. Those were always some daunting moments for us. And then obviously you hop on social media and you see somebody else is conceived or had a child. But one of the things that we did do was we didn't dismiss the pain and the hurt. We kind of partnered with people who were conceiving. So for example, when I found out my sister was pregnant, we made sure when she was in the labor and delivery that we showed up with food and made sure that they were kind of together. And then one of my boys, he was pregnant. We made sure we showed up with gifts and were outpouring love, even in the season where we were believing God for something that we desired. So I would say that probably was the most challenging task to do, was to pour into a space where we also were, where we essentially lacked, or we didn't have what we desired. One, 2, 3. No, he's pregnant.
No!
Some of the emotions that I felt, or that I would say kind of imploded when I first found out that we had conceived was disbelief. That was probably the first emotion, if I'm being honest, or just the knee jerk was like, this isn't real. Like, knowing when I add up the amount of time, which was, you know, a former marriage of 8 years and then 4 years into this, you're talking about 11 years. So I've seen no's for over a decade. So to finally get this yes, I really was like in a state of disbelief. I couldn't believe it, even though my wife had the pregnancy test and I saw it. I was like, and this was the strip one, so it wasn't it wasn't the digital. I was like, you need to buy a digital, right? So we got the digital. I still didn't believe it, I'm being honest. And then I think there was finally like a moment of acceptance, but there still was disbelief throughout at least the first few months of the pregnancy. I couldn't come to grips with the fact that this was really happening. No.
I'm sure you're gonna get one. Okay, you had a small one. Alright, it's your turn next. Hold on, Ez, you gotta hold on. Hold on to the top, Ez. To the top. Alright, you ready? Alright, we'll get your time. 1, 2, 3. Okay, your turn. You ready? You gotta hold on. 1, 2, 3, 4.
I really had this utopia thought process or ideology of what fatherhood would look like. And I know a lot of that has to do with maybe the story I've told myself or the stuff I've seen on TV. I really assumed that fatherhood would just be easy and that it would just come natural, and that when the children got here, that I would just have this overwhelming amount of joy. But that was not what happened. Like, in all transparency, I felt so disconnected from the process throughout the process, because I'm thinking about, you know, when the child gets here, where do I come in? Where do I step in at? You know, what do I do to help build this child and help to shape this child into, you know, a well-balanced human being? But emotionally, it probably was the most taxing and has been the most taxing experience that I've had. Like, it's taxed to marriage, it's taxed to time, it's taxed to bandwidth. So my reality was like, my perception was so contorted. I didn't know like how much this thing was really going to be tapping into me from a capacity vantage point, from, you know, sleep deprivation to thinking about like, now, how do I move up in my career to make sure that my kids are taken care of financially, you know, to also making sure that my wife is taken care of. So I think emotionally, I had more moments of frustration than I had joy when my first child was here. It takes so much emotional equity, so much bandwidth, especially if you're doing it right and you're really wanting to be a present father. And I would say, if anything now, like, God does help me balance out my emotional intelligence, to say the least. So when there's moments where I'm feeling challenged and I'm feeling overwhelmed, which happens oftentimes when you have 3 kids running around here screaming at the top of their lungs, God has helped me to, instead of pull away, to lean into those moments. And that's honestly been what's been taking place like over the past 4 years. I couldn't do this by myself, and I really needed to lean in on some additional support. That's what started therapy for me. And I know therapy is not a one-all answer for everything, but I will say therapy has armed me, and I've been in therapy since then, and I've continued to, and I'm still in therapy now. But that's been one thing that's really armed me with language, resources, as well as just tools on how to navigate my marriage well, and then also my children. And one of the questions my therapist asked me was, how often do you experience joy? And I told him, based on my definition of joy, it's probably been 2 times within the past year. And then that's when we started to really put in the deep work of like figuring out how do you become the individual you desire to be down the line. This conversation is important is because oftentimes men will suffer in silence. If I'm being frank, we're not as prone to emote, to share how we feel, to express ourselves. And we oftentimes don't lean into community like our spouses do, right? So for us, the way society has built us is just to be tough and to take it and, with stride and to keep moving. And we have this tendency to just do. And that's what we're known as, just doers, right? So I think this conversation is important is because I think if anything, when we do reach out and when we do partner with people or we do pick up the phone and call a brother, even though like it may be a little bit challenging or you may not have the words to say, we're actually showing that we have emotional intelligence and that we're able to partner with brothers and sisters to help us process through what we're going through. I think also it really impacts, and I'm speaking specifically to Black men, our mental health. Like we have a lot that's put on our plate already, and when we don't get a chance to express it, then it becomes toxic. And I think somebody gave this analogy of like, what happens with us is it's like a can of soda, and for us, you don't know what all we dealing with, but it's been shaken for like a very long time until you pop the top. And then it's like, dang, like I didn't know all that was in there, right? When it should be like, hey, you should be letting a little bit of air out the tire on a day over day basis. Oftentimes we don't get that, or we're not leveraging that through community, through fellowship, whatever that looks like, man. If it's just one person that you're kind of leaning into, I think is necessary. And I think what this journey has showed me is that, like community can really help you process and get through things without the ship being, sunken or completely capsized, right? So for me, I think if anything, this is like a platform to encourage men to reach out. Like somebody is present that can help you process through these emotions. It's just we have to be trusting to that process.
Party that ball. Shake that body, party that ball. Shake that body, party that body. Come and have a good time with G.O.D.